It began like any other quiet Saturday at the lake. The sun was just right warm but not punishing, and a slight breeze drifted in off the water, rustling the trees and sending little ripples across the surface. I'd been looking forward to this all week, just me, my tent, my hammock, and zero interruptions. The spot I set up was technically part of my property, nestled right against the lake on a gently sloping bank I'd cleared and maintained myself. I had the survey markers installed 2 years ago after the HOA drama started, just to avoid these kinds of disputes. But of course, with Karen around, no line was ever respected, especially not the one drawn in the dirt. She was already having one of her parties when I arrived. Her house sat diagonally across from mine, up on a rise with an inflated sense of grandeur, white shutters, fake columns, and those little solar lights lining her walkway like a runway for self-importance. Her yard was full of people, all of them dressed like they'd been invited to a yacht club brunch. Karen didn't do anything small. Even her lemonade probably had imported lemons. Still, I thought maybe this time things would be peaceful. I set up my canvas tent carefully, anchoring it just a few feet back from the water. Inside I had a couple of camping chairs, a cooler packed with drinks and snacks, and my Bluetooth speaker softly playing old-school jazz. I stretched the hammock between 2 trees, lit a mosquito-repelling citronella torch, and settled in with a good book and a cold drink. Everything was perfect, until it wasn't. The first sign of trouble was the laughter, too loud, too close. I looked up and saw them, 4 or 5 of Karen's guests, clearly deep into their drinks, stumbling through the trees toward my setup. One guy with a flamingo shirt tried to balance a cup and a wine bottle in the same hand. A woman was laughing so hard she could barely walk straight, and just behind them, 2 kids darted in between trees, chasing each other with sparklers. I frowned. I stood up and waved a hand. Hey, that area's private property. You've crossed over the boundary. None of them even looked at me. The guy in the flamingo shirt tripped over the root near my hammock and crashed right into it, bringing the whole thing down in a tangle. The woman screamed with laughter, snapping photos like it was a comedy sketch. One of the kids ran full speed into my tent pole, knocking it loose and collapsing the front of the tent like a sagging circus top. My cooler tipped over, and I watched helplessly as my lemonade bottle rolled into the dirt. The guy actually picked it up and tried to take a swig, then tossed it like trash into the bushes. That's when I marched over. I'm not asking twice, I said firmly, standing in front of my tent. You're trespassing, and you've destroyed my property. The laughter faded a bit, replaced by awkward glances and murmured apologies. 1 or 2 of them started backing away, realizing that crossed the line. Then Karen arrived. She always made an entrance, wearing a giant sun hat that made her look like she was hiding from the paparazzi, oversized sunglasses that covered half her face, and a beach wrap she probably hadn't bought at any store in town. She strutted through the trees like she owned the entire shoreline. What's going on here? She demanded, folding her arms and glaring at me like I was the one at fault. Your guests just walked through my property, knocked over my setup, and damaged my tent, I said, trying to keep my voice even. They need to leave. Karen scoffed. This area is shared. The lakefront belongs to the community. No, it doesn't, I replied, pointing to the orange survey stake sticking out of the ground nearby. Everything from that marker to the water is my personal easement. That includes the land you're standing on. She squinted at it, but I could tell she already knew it was there. She just didn't care. I think you're being extremely aggressive, she said. You're harassing my guests. I'm calling the police. Good, I said, reaching into my pocket for my phone. Because I've got something they'll want to see. Her face twitched just a flicker, but it told me everything. She didn't know I had cameras. That was her mistake a few weeks back, after the last round of drama with her unauthorized landscaping crew clipping branches from my trees. I'd installed 2 trail cameras disguised as bird boxes. They faced the boundary line and the lake, recording everything in high definition. That footage had already helped me win a previous complaint against her with the HOA, and I had a feeling it was about to come in handy again. Karen stormed off, flipping open her phone and putting on her best concerned citizen voice for the dispatcher. Yes, there's a man threatening people by the lake. Yes, I feel unsafe. He's yelling and scaring the children. I wasn't yelling, I hadn't even raised my voice. But Karen knew how to weaponize tone and drama. What she didn't know was that the moment I stepped onto my property, everything was recorded, clear audio, crisp visuals, and GPS-timestamped. I pulled out my tablet and connected to the cloud server where the footage automatically uploaded. Sure enough, the video was there. Karen's guests crossing the boundary, the hammock collapsing, the tent being damaged, and Karen herself brushing off my warnings. I looked back toward the lake. My peaceful sanctuary was a mess. The tent sagged, the hammock was torn, and even the fire pit had been kicked over and filled with dirt. But more than that, I felt violated. This wasn't about a party or a mistake. It was about control. Karen had made it clear that as long as she was HOA president, she felt entitled to every inch of the neighborhood, rules be damned. So when the flashing lights finally appeared at the top of the hill and the sheriff's deputy stepped out of his cruiser, I took a deep breath and got ready, because I wasn't just defending a piece of land, I was defending my right to live peacefully, without someone like Karen stomping through my life like she owned it. And this time, I wasn't just angry, this time, I was prepared. The sheriff's deputy stepped out of his cruiser and adjusted his belt, already squinting toward the lake where Karen, in her usual fashion, was putting on an Oscar-worthy performance. She waved dramatically, one hand on her hip and the other gesturing toward me like she'd just spotted a fugitive in her backyard. "There he is, officer," she called. "That's the man who's been threatening us. He's unstable. I don't feel safe." I stood by the wreckage of my tent.com, but simmering beneath the surface. I knew how this could look to someone walking into the situation cold. Karen had her guests backing her up, and I was just one guy standing among a heap of flattened gear. But I also had something they didn't: the truth. The deputy approached me cautiously. "Sir, can you explain what's going on here?" "Absolutely," I said, holding up my tablet. "I've got footage from my property cameras. They'll show everything you need to see." Karen tried to interrupt, talking over me, but the deputy held up a hand. "Ma'am, please, I'll hear both sides." I pulled up the video. It started with a timestamp clearly showing the time and date. Then came the scene: Karen's guests stumbling across the boundary line, the hammock going down, the tent collapsing, my property being treated like an amusement park. Then, of course, Karen herself striding in and dismissing me like I was the one causing problems. The audio captured it all: my calm warnings, her snide responses, and her guests' careless behavior. The deputy watched in silence, his expression tightening. When the video ended, he nodded slowly. "All right," he said, turning to Karen. "You said this was a shared space, but from what I can see, there are clearly marked boundaries, and your guests crossed them. That means they were trespassing. Also looks like there was damage to private property." Karen's face twisted, her jaw clenching. "That video could be edited." "You don't know if, ma'am," the deputy said firmly. "I'm not going to argue with you. The footage is timestamped, and it matches what I'm seeing here on the ground. The stakes are visible, the damage is obvious. I don't see any indication of this man threatening anyone. In fact, he asked you all to leave, nicely." Her guests were suddenly very quiet. A few had already started inching their way back toward Karen's yard, clearly not eager to be part of whatever consequences were about to land. "So what happens now?" I asked. "Well," the deputy said, "technically you could press charges for trespassing and property damage, but that's up to you." I looked at Karen. Her sunglasses were off now, and her eyes darted around, calculating. There was no apology, no remorse, just the kind of cold anger that comes from losing power in front of an audience. "But I wasn't doing this for revenge. Not yet, not today," I said. "But I do want a formal incident report filed, and I'd like a copy for my HOA complaint." Karen's head snapped toward me. "You're going to the board?" "You bet I am," I said, "and I'm submitting everything: this footage, the damage, the police report, all of it." The deputy gave her one last look before scribbling notes into his pad. "I suggest you make things right with your neighbor, ma'am. Otherwise, next time he might not be so generous." And with that, he walked back to his car. Karen stood frozen for a moment before turning sharply on her heel and stomping back up toward her house. I heard her mutter something to the guests still lingering around, something about being targeted, and how ridiculous all this is, but it didn't matter. The damage was done. And not just to my tent. Over the next 2 days, I put my plan into motion. First, I contacted the HOA and requested a special hearing. I knew the vice president of the board, Tom, had always quietly disliked Karen's dictatorial style. He'd once told me over a casual sidewalk chat that she was a lawsuit waiting to happen. So when I sent him the footage and the report, his reply was immediate: "We'll call an emergency meeting." I rebuilt my tent in the meantime, better than before. New canvas, stronger poles, and solar-powered lights around the edge that lit up at night. I wasn't hiding anymore. Every evening I sat out there with a drink and my tablet, the glow of the footage playing silently in the background just in case. I needed a reminder of what this neighborhood used to feel like when I wasn't constantly Looking over my shoulder, the HOA meeting was held via Zoom, partly for convenience, partly because no one wanted to be in the same room with Karen when she got cornered. The board members watched the footage, read the report, and heard both sides. Karen tried every excuse she could come up with. He's always been difficult. I thought it was part of the common space. I didn't know the boundaries were official, but none of it held up. The footage didn't lie. The police report confirmed it. And my case was airtight. By the end of the meeting, the decision was unanimous. Karen was removed as HOA president, effective immediately. Her ability to make unilateral decisions was revoked, and she was placed on a 6-month probation period where any future complaints against her would be reviewed directly by the HOA's legal advisor. I didn't cheer, I didn't gloat, I just nodded, said thank you, and logged off. The next morning, a delivery truck pulled into my driveway. Inside was a brand new tent, top of the line, waterproof, with extra ventilation and reinforced seams. No note, no signature, but I didn't need one. I knew who had sent it. I set it up that afternoon and sat beneath it, watching the lake shimmer in the sun. Karen's house was quiet. No music, no guests, and certainly no parties. Occasionally I'd catch a glimpse of her peering through her window, then quickly ducking away. Good. She could live with a little fear for a change, not of me, but of accountability. The kind of fear that comes from realizing your self-appointed power doesn't protect you when the truth finally comes out. I leaned back in my chair, lifted my glass, and smiled at the camera perched in the tree above me. It blinked its little red light in return, silent but ever watchful. And just like that, peace returned to the lake. Only this time, it was here to stay.